PARIVISION fans, come here. 2 weeks ago, we talked about feet, and now we're talking about PVISION, so going through all of Harry's fetishes one by one. And now we have Mauisnake on, a return guest after, it's been a while. I think it was almost a year ago we had you on. So, Alex, I know that you had some fun talking about PARIVISION the last couple of events on the desk, but, we thought we'd bring you on to give your thoughts now. After they made the grand final again. So
Yeah, why not? I mean, it's a team that has kind of been the story in an otherwise, dare I say, monotonous continuation of the Vitality era. It's the one shining light that could perhaps, maybe by the end of the season, save us from what is just feeling like a Groundhog Day, where every day you wake up and it's a new Vitality win, a new zweih MVP. When will it end? Maybe Jame knows. Maybe he does.
I think I wrote this in the newsletter because it's literally like we're at the stage now where commentators are having to remind us how amazing Vitality are because they know everyone's just so
Yeah.
bored at home, just waiting for something interesting, and it's like we just have to feel about how great they are now. Like it's the Astralis level of, you have to gaslight the fans into like this is greatness. You're watching greatness. Appreciate greatness. But just don't worry that it's 13-3. Don't worry about that.
I think that, right. I mean, I made it the take on my hot take show about the fact that at this point, Vitality should just lose one game somewhere, some grand final, just to give esteem to one of their opponents. PARIVISION would have been a cool one, just because then you're actually gonna tell the rest of the world, yeah, all of those wins that they had versus, because now PARIVISION. I mean, we can talk about PARIVISION more later, but I think it wouldn't be in Vitality's worst interest to just take their foot off the gas for one tournament.
just for the results.
Just so that somebody else can win a grand final, and so people think the era is a little bit tougher. Even it is tough. It is tough. I'm not gaslighting, but you just need to reinforce that idea. It's like, it can't all just lose in the grand finals, okay? It just feels like it's a foregone conclusion right now.
It's the difference between 2018 Liquid and 2019 Liquid. Like it just Berlin was that much more fun because you just thought there might be a chance, and I think we sort of had that in Budapest, but it just wasn't quite the same.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, once Furia collapsed, it really wasn't the same. I'm glad you brought up the hot take show because, a while ago I had this thought of if I went on Snake and Banter, my ugly point would be that hot take point maids has ruined your career, Alex. Because people take those hot takes that you guys make and they seem to think it's your real opinion, and then you just see on Reddit and on Twitter people shit talking you as if those were your legitimate actual thoughts and what you actually think. And then you see Reddit threads that just shit on you for days, and everyone's calling you a bad analyst and saying you're not getting hired for those. So it's always really funny.
I know. Actually, yeah, as we digress here, I mean, I think the occasional comments, I mean, I read a lot of the stuff on those kind of forums and Reddit and whatever, and it's I love to do it, especially on stream, because it's just good stream content, isn't it? To just read what like fans are saying and everything. But yeah, no, the occasional comments that are defending me, which actually know what I do in the space, creating new conversations, put words into, or just using my eye test and a little bit of, and stats combined to make opinions and takes. But then there'll always be the one guy that's like, his opinions are shit. He thought Vitality should lose, and it's like, you're missing the point there. You're missing the point of the show, but that's okay. That's okay. It is the show's entire premise is to rage bait, so I guess it's getting at that. And at the same time, it's like, I mean, 2 of the 3 TOs are hiring me for practically all of their events, so I'm not really worried about the career side of things.
And if we didn't have you, no one would hate on the top 20. So it'd be
exactly
way too peaceful.
Exactly.
You think that, Harry? The
yeah,
from
I'm
the top 20 told you that?
It's just these thought leaders, these woke thought leaders, just ruining the top 20 conversation for everyone. That's all it is.
We need to start a discourse.
Let's get back on track of it with PARIVISION. Obviously, they've had this kind of big rise in the last couple of months. They had the run at the major that helped them get up the ranking. Obviously, the Land win before that James says gave him more feelings than the Blast Bounty win. And then obviously the Blast Bounty win, and then the run to the final here in Cluj after they were eliminated in Krakow. So it's been a pretty strong couple of months for them. They've obviously eclipsed Spirit on the ranking, a big topic as well. But before we dive into the actual conversation about PARIVISION, Harry, you have your classic meme slide of good cop and bad cop this time around.
Yeah, they've not improved since Maui was last on the show. It's fair to say, but it's here. It's here. I think it's the interesting conversation where, you know, so much of CS nowadays is to kind of, I think vitalities don't break the mold that much, but it's so much about like firepower and star players and everything. I think it's really refreshing to have kind of the identity of a team actually just be the coach and in-game leader. Like, I actually think that's good for the scene that we have a team like this. And I also I think, because I was watching the podcast they did like October last year or something. So it was before Budapest. And it's just, you can just see the kind of the way they think about things. So you can see why it works in a way. And I think having dastan be the bad cop is kind of a crucial part of their success. And it maybe you can't really talk about PARIVISION without talking about how kind of these Russian-speaking teams act differently to what we might expect. And I think dastan is a huge part of that.
Yeah, Alex, what do you make of the dastan Jame dynamic between this good cop bad cop scenario that Harry's played out?
It's pretty apt. I feel like Jame, because he's with them in the server at all points in time, directing them, I don't think that he wants to draw much animosity from his fellow players. You know, he can kind of rub shoulders with them, and it's like, how do you do, fellow fragger? It's kind of the Bushimi meme of that. Whereas obviously he plays the game in such a unique style, whereas dastan seems to just lay the law down a little bit more regarding, hey, you should never peek that again. Don't ever make that move that you just made. But I feel, and I think you need a little bit of both. If both of them were just hammering the players, then it would just draw too much ire. But if you have one guy, and I think that it's perfect that it's Jame being the good cop, because then it just kind of goads the rest of the guys to listen to him a little bit more, because it seems like he's a little bit more positive reinforcement, whereas dastan is more negative reinforcement for all the people that took Psych 101 out there. And I feel like listening to dastan's 30-minute conversation with Heku, also, he talked about the fact that because they've been in a boot camp for a year now, legitimately, I think it is 12 months roughly, they have just had the time to work through so many situations. They go through so many types of scenarios that they can outline how they want to play those moments out. And so that's why everybody there is so incredibly well drilled. Well, primarily the Nota, the Cielo, the BELCHONOKK, all those three have just worked with Jame and dastan so much at this point. And probably zweih works a little bit more off of intuition right now, but he's coming in thinking he can be a bit of a star. And I'm sure they'll beat that out of him entirely, and they might even get better for it. But it's a good situation. And you're right that it's a fun way to frame a team when so frequently we just look at the star players of almost every other roster.
What do you think about the way they kind of, I mean, we use Bootcamp obviously all the time, but I feel it's like an actual Bootcamp for them in terms of, like, I think they even talk about it, like it's kind of like army style leadership from these two a lot of the time. Like, do you think it's sustainable in a way to have that kind of 12-month Bootcamp? Like, because that's the only fear I have with PARIVISION, is really that they're just at some point going to be so tired that they just need a break, especially because they're making finals. So like a lot of the rest time these kind of the 10th best team in the world has is often when they get on certain groups, and you get an extra week that you're expecting. So are you worried about burnout at all for these guys?
If they're in their young 20s, or I'd have to look at the ages of everybody. I forget off the top of my head, but I thought everybody is practically in their young 20s except for Jame. What is it? BELCHONOKK,
22, 2018.
2018, 18. They're fine. They're gonna be fine. I never, when I lived in a team house when I was 25 for a couple seasons of ECL.
The ASIO team house?
Yeah, the ASIO team house, the infamous ASIO team house. One season was enough for me as a 25-year-old. I just didn't like the conditions enough, because I knew how I wanted to live my life at that point. But I think the boot camp, that's if anybody hasn't been in an actual boot camp, the way I would relate it most is like you're dorming in college. You would, you go to university. Like, I don't know, the dorm that I had when I was in a freshman at university was probably like 200 square feet. Like, it was tiny. It was a box. It was the smallest thing I've ever lived in before or since then. And I just dealt with it because I didn't really know better, and I was there to just grind out schoolwork and leave the home or leave my apartment anyways, or dorm, to go to classes. I think that if anybody like thinks about that situation for themselves as they're an adult now, would you want to go back to that? Maybe. Like, maybe you're really motivated to go to, grad school or some later education, and that's kind of the closest thing it feels. But I think a lot of people, you tell them that you got to live in a small little room again, and you're just going to go super hard into a singular discipline, and most people would wince at that. But if you're as hungry as these guys are, I don't think it should be as much of a problem. And in fact, I think that the fact that Jame brought his wife means that he's not probably going to get burnt out, because that's the one thing that you would probably miss as a late 20-year-old or whatever he is, that you're just away from family. But if you bring your family with you, what's there to worry about?
Yeah, I was gonna say the big thing there is the timeline for Jane, because obviously the young kids can probably boot camp for quite a while in that kind of situation. But the fact that Jame has his wife there really does extend that ability to keep boot camping at that age. But yeah, you said hey fellow kids earlier. It's more like, or hey fellow fraggers earlier, but in Jane's teams I feel like it's hey fellow savers a little bit more.
Yeah, not bad.
Non-frag.
But yeah, I mean, Harry, you always drop this little stat sheet that shows us how the players have been performing since for this one it's basically since the start of the year, since they brought zweih in and had a couple of role changes, obviously giving his away but more of his comfortable spots. And they've been relatively even in terms of frag distribution in the way they've played. I mean, I'm also surprised to see BELCHONOKK's rating this low relative to how he was before, but it makes sense with some of the swaps that have happened as well.
Yeah, and I think it's that they're really a team where you have to kind of divide role and positions in your head, because Zwei's still playing a lot of the same, positions that a lot of them he had on Spirit, a lot of them he had on Amiga as well. But it's very much a different way of seeing like team structure, because like playing long is still bad, but Zweih is like their highest rated player on CT side and everything like that. And I think the really interesting thing with them this year is that because they have like such a low round win percentage, even though they've made 2 finals in 3 events, that their stats just aren't that great. Like we're talking about players like Xylo and Nota who are very, very highly rated, and on an eye test you kind of see the ability, and then you look at a stat sheet and they're like 101, and you're like, there's no way they're 101. I've just watched them be amazing every time I've watched them. But they're also so inconsistent, and they're also shared, and it's an interesting thing to talk about their structure overall, because I guess BELCHONOKK is the kind of supportive piece. But Jame has talked about, there's never been a team with an era without a support player. He said that in the podcast with Dastan. And that they're kind of doing that, because BELCHONOKK is clearly good enough to not go full kind of AW or Sanji or that kind of traditional Jame role. So it's an interesting thing when you think about their structure and how different it is to a lot of the top teams. And I guess that's part of that is just the Orping game leader, but it's still interesting for them to not have the designated support player at the moment.
Yeah, I think when looking at their distribution of their stat lines and everything, I just think that so often because the plans that Jame makes on the fly sometimes are so team oriented, like we're going to do a 4-man stack on a bomb site, or we're going to just kind of like go on a whim for this call. It's almost like, I think zweih is a nice exception because of him doing decently on his own, because I think he gets a little bit more room, like wiggle room, basically in the strats. I feel like in the defaults, he kind of gets to, if he sees weaknesses, he'll call his own number just a little bit more. I'm not saying like he's not just running out and ego checking people on a frequent basis, but at the bounty, for example, he did actually kind of do that. I think against I think it was against Astralis. He kind of just got to move around so much on his own towards the B side of the map. Kind of, he'll decide if he wants to cut rotations or push through the double doors at mid, or even, I think sometimes maybe even like move out through B tunnels here or there. Like he'll kind of have a lot more choice, whereas everybody else is just by the end of the round, they're almost all clustered, and then it's just about trading. So it's rare that you don't always fall in line in the specific order. Like I don't think, for example, between Nota and Cielo, I can't say with certainty who is running out first every single time or who's playing the power position in a bomb site stack every single time. It's not like they're always giving it to one guy over the other.
Yeah, I think this one.
Oh, I think
shows that,
Nota
right?
might be muted. Oh.
Oh.
Go on, Harry. All good.
Oh, you muted? You can go.
I was just gonna say what you've outlined here also kind of illustrates what Maui's talking about and the way that they actually kind of play together a lot more.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's the 5v4, 4v5, I think is very illustrative of how they win rounds. Like it's even the openers, because they're often playing this death ball that kind of Maui's talking about, is they're not winning off multi-kills as much as other teams. Even flashes, like they're much happier to kind of sacrifice one of the 4 riflers and trade them than they are to kind of use lots of utility to kind of engineer those entries. Like it's very much a kind of classic Russian World War II system here. Just send people in and it's going to be fine. We're going to trade.
Jesus.
But, you know,
Okay.
basically,
All right.
this is what look what it
Not
is. It's the
inaccurate.
5v4s.
Not inaccurate. Not.
They even sometimes have 3 guns between 5. It's perfect. But yeah, look what it brings out of you. Look, when you have a system that is so focused on trading, they're so much better at 5v4s than kind of the average team. It's like this is literally as good as anyone, probably maybe Vitality in this filter. Like that, it is ridiculous how good they are in these situations.
Yeah, I think also I wanted to say something that is always interesting as a conversation around the way Jame calls his CT&T sides, and obviously it's slow, but this conversation I feel like is still stuck a little bit in the way that he used to play. Like I think he has changed his system in a sense of not being so focused on being passive and saving. Like they do take gambles still, and they do still save a lot, but they're also very calculated in the way that they do some of those things in terms of the space they take back for getting back some of these 4v5s. And I will say, I think when it comes to Jame, a lot of people seem to really hate watching him for some reason. Not as much now, I guess, with just the success PARIVISION's having, but I actually really have enjoyed like all of the games that I've watched PARIVISION play this year, in terms of the way that they're reading rounds and the way that they're adapting, and they're even the gamble stacks are just interesting to see because it's not all predicated on a complete lack of information. They do kind of throw some misdirection in there. I think there's a couple of good videos as well. I think Sticko made one. I think there's a few good ones about basically how James sets up some of these rounds to keep the misdirection going. So, you know, they will sometimes just completely give up, for example, banana really early in the round and just all go towards A. And a lot of teams don't just forfeit that control super early. But then he will have these rounds where he'll just be sitting top mid with an op to, you know, throw some misdirection, because if they do re-peek for information, then, you know, if there's an opper sitting top mid, usually you have more people there, but the rest of the team might be in banana. So there's a lot of micro bits to his gameplay that I think really do highlight how different they play, and you've seen that in a lot of interviews as well, where, you know, in-game leaders and teams are all saying that it is a completely different style that you have to learn to play against.
Is that the lack of lurkers almost, do you think? Or
say again?
Do you think that's kind of the lack of lurkers works for them? I think it was I think an Ash video I saw where it's like you have James top mid on his own and then 4 rifles banana, because if you see the AWP normally, you go like, okay. Like when you see the AWP, you normally sing the whole pack, but with PARIVISION, they are able to kind of use what should be a weakness in terms of, if you know that they're constantly with 4 people, you should be able to take space mid round, and then you just walk into an AWP trying to retake mid. Like I think it's stuff like that, and also the pace changes as well on this team are so much better than the boring CSGO VP at times was. But it was almost more like the kind of Rio pacing, because in Rio there was that different pacing, I think. But yeah, go on, Mario. Sorry.
Well, they did get flanked a decent amount by Vitality in the Inferno game, especially. I think Apex and Flamesy would just push down banana, and it's not that every rotation was always flanking them, but a handful were. A handful of rotations were just backstabbing them, or just like when they felt that there was more pressure in one side. But I think they do a good enough job in the rounds to push back whatever space they feel like is a little too dangerous for the opponents to have, which would result in too timely of a flank. But also, Jame and the rest of them, I mean, they also have such a great sense of timing that even if there is a good flank timing, usually they breach the bomb site that they're targeting. They then have a guy watching the flank, and usually he can at least get one as he's trying to, it's not like a really strong backstab that's killing the first guy for free as they're trying to get into the bomb site. I guess that's my thing with it. But yeah, no, I mean it's hard to play against also because I think that Jame is also willing to swap things up in the middle of a round. It's not every map. Like Inferno, I think it's more concerted effort, but sometimes on Dust 2, I just find that they are quick to just change up their mind. If they see I did that one thing in like a pre-game segment on their Dust 2 where it just felt like James saw one piece of utility and then just was like, okay, boom, we're going. This is a timing right now. And they're all just so willing to listen to him. I think the T side it's kind of slow, but it's not. I mean, it's completely different than what Outsiders was. It's like if it wasn't just Jame, I don't even think people would even relate the slow aspect of them. They relate the saving because they
Yep.
probably do say. I don't know what the percentage is. I'm sure you guys have it. Like I would assume they save maybe like one round more per half than the average T side team. It's something like that. Like there's a 3v5 and they're going to save, whereas another team like a Vitality probably would have tried that. So that kind of makes it harkens back to that time. But in terms of the way they play, they're pretty poppy. They're pretty exec heavy or they always have an outline finisher, whereas I felt like the old Outsiders VP kind of constricted you a lot more. They were slow, meticulous, they would play to punish. But I think that was a better style in CSGO because playing to punish was just a better option. Like now, if you're an extremity player holding for a push from an anchor, it's a lot harder to be consistently killing him. Whereas in CSGO, I just felt like you would always get that kill.
I was gonna say on the Vitality note quickly, I think you really saw the inexperience of PARIVISION a little bit in that game because of the amount of prep that Vitality could do. And that was actually Sticko's video, and I think Chad also had a segment on Confirmed where he talked about, basically on Overpass, they're playing the same like 3 to 4 positions, and they were getting heavily countered with nades and with the way that Apex was calling around that. On the Inferno side, I think what was really interesting when you watch that game back is you're right, the Vitality was flanking them a lot, but at the same time, if you watch back those rounds, PARIVISION had like 4v2s on a lot of those sites where they were actually about to death ball into them, but then they not necessarily missed their timing, but they took maybe 2 seconds too long in several of those rounds, and that's actually what ended up making the difference. And I don't know if that was because it was a grand final and they had some nerves or what actually influenced that, because I think in a lot of other games you'll see them actually hit that timing without issue. But in this game, in that game specifically, you could see those timings were missed, and I think maybe 5 rounds straight, especially during that little comeback streak by Vitality at the end. Those timings were just missed a little bit, and that made all the difference, both with Vitality having the read, but also with PARIVISION just stumbling a little bit and waiting out a little bit too long. Because they if they'd actually gone through with their call a little bit sooner, they would have 100% had the site without the flank even coming into play.
Do you think, because I think there's a quote slide on this a little bit later on, but I think it's interesting to bring up now, is that they don't really have that kind of the second voice almost a lot of the way, because both of their space-taking rifles are kind of on an equal hierarchy at least, because you don't have the roaming in-game leader who is able to kind of be the secondary caller like Yukinder or Nico might have been in other teams, right? And it is just Jame really in this team that has that authority, as far as I know, and maybe sometimes that does lead to a little bit of hesitation, because one of Xylo or Nota are supposed to be mid-rounding based on a situation, but neither one of them is supposed to be the guy all the time. And I think it's just another difficulty of this kind of structure where you have 2 star aggressive riflers, but then neither of them are the star and neither of them are kind of the final voice in terms of calling, because I mean, in fairness to them, like they're still developing. They don't know which one's going to be better at that role long term. But it just means in moments like that, sometimes if Jame isn't 100% certain on something, it just needs someone to kind of back him up. It maybe doesn't happen as much as in a team where there's a lot more experience to go around.
I will quickly read out the slide before Maui jumps in, just for the audio-only listeners. Also, you can also find us on Spotify, where the video version and the audio version is available, or follow us or join our Discord as well if you want to talk to Harry about stats or join a silence conversation 1v1 with Harry all the time.
Every
But
EVP.
this quote is from Jane talking about Noda and Zelo, and it says, when the captain plays one of those roles, it's much easier. He takes everything into his own hands, and the other main player doesn't need to do much. When we talk about our team, two young guys have to agree between themselves. There is some lag between their thoughts and how those thoughts are perceived. In reality, it's all very complicated. We got into this situation. I don't know how. I don't know how to get out of it either. Alex, if you wanted to jump in with what Harry was saying.
Yeah, I mean, just the way that those two guys have come up in the space. I mean, I'm pretty sure they're just trying to, at this point, do what Jame would want. It's not. I don't think they really. I'm sure they have some instincts, but it's. I mean, I can't really say without listening to comms and stuff like that. That's why I think some of the most successful teams ever have had very clear secondary voices. Where, I mean, you could look at Vitality today. I'm sure Rops is saying an awful lot. I'm sure Mezzi is saying an awful lot too. I'm sure, and I feel like Astralis, it seemed like practically everybody could be a secondary caller on that team. Even for the intangible side of what Stewie brought to the Liquid team, he was the clear secondary caller. Any team that has any kind of length of success seems to have had a guy that was very willing to take charge of his little sector of the map. And if Noda and Cielo aren't able to, then you probably assume that PARIVISION are sort of just capped to how good James calling on the day, as opposed to anybody else being a standout.
Yeah,
Is that a role you think zweih could fill?
I mean, I think zweih should be the guy to do that, just because he has that extra bit of experience. But I don't know if zweih really came up in a way where he knew what Lear was putting together for him on Amiga rounds. Like, I don't know if he was chiming in that aspect. That's not really the sentiment I got out of Amiga, because even Lear himself sort of, I forgot the quote exactly, but
yeah, it was mine too. I remember it was like I asked him. I was basically laying him up to praise zweih, and he basically just said like, I like zweih. Like he's very quiet. He's very quiet. But he's good at pressing buttons. He's very quiet.
Yeah,
he doesn't understand the system I'm kind of putting in place for him. Like that was very much the vibe of the answer.
Yeah, it was very much a Biguzera on Skulls after he left kind of answer, where it was just that a lot of flaws in his game, but he does click really fast. Like both of them sort of said the same thing. So you would hope that zweih or one of them can step up to do it. Usually it just ends up being the second oldest guy on the team, but I mean, with the level of experience, it's just going to be whoever it clicks for faster. They should probably actually just outline that it's one guy over another for the sake of their team in the near future, but it's not that simple.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be Nota, because I mean, he plays all the in-game leader roles mostly on T side. Like he's the one top mid Dust 2, for example, stuff like that. And I think when dastan, I can't remember if it was mine or someone else's, but we asked him about Nota, and he kind of said like his understanding has come on so well for an 18-year-old. Like he is kind of a much smarter player than maybe from the artist, at least Jello and zweih just seem much more about kind of raw mechanical ability. And then that's not to say Nota doesn't have that, but yeah. And I think it's the interesting thing with zweih, because like we said, he's got the more experience now, but then he's also kind of got the freedom, but then also in a way is playing very differently to how he could on Spirit. And I think it was a really good VOO video actually on why zweih was struggling in Spirit compared to PARIVISION. And it's just a mentality of thinking you're one of the better players in the team. Like, so every decision he made in Spirit, he had to think about it like 3 times, because he knew that he would just lose the round for donk if he made the wrong decision. And that was often just as bad as just making the wrong decision. But it's in PARIVISION, there's so much more kind of clarity of thought, at least within the system. He is able to be a little bit more active than on Spirit, where you should just wait and then entry and then let donk trade you. Like it's much nicer. And I think you can kind of see that on the server as well, that the confidence is coming through just sort of because of his teammates and the change of scenario, not actually because of any meaningful changes in positions or anything.
kind of like the Yanko quote. I think it was Yanko at least, where the right decision can become the wrong decision if 1 second later if you hesitate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was him. Yeah. I mean, well, zweih on Spear was just, he was completely out of his element. Yeah, I mean, he also, anytime he wanted to make that one extra little peek, it was just a bad idea. It's just, like, he was just, the amount of times, until he played Falcons, the amount of times I saw him just give up the get the first kill, but then immediately let himself get traded. Not force them to trade him, but swing into the oncoming tease into his bomb site. It was innumerable, and it was devastating for watching a Spirit team that just needed an anchor that would just stay alive for 2-3 more seconds.
That's what I find it's so crazy that PARIVISION are this kind of the discipline team that are now matching up really well against Falcons precisely because they punish those kinds of mistakes and those kind of 3v5 scenarios. And I think it's it's funny thinking about a team that should be this kind of full of mistakes because they're all 18 and they are clearly as well because of how dastan and Jame talk about them, but they're still able to kind of fit within this system and it's not as obvious that they're messing up rounds to the outside at least.
In terms of this graphic, Harry, what are you trying to showcase here? Because it's obviously their performance dips a little bit when you take that step up in competition. We've seen that, but that also comes with experience over time. I mean, this is obviously also why you robbed Noda of an MVP at Blast Bounty.
One good match out for him, of course. But yeah, I think it's more just to show kind of all of them just statistically are not really quite at the level that they were last year, and it's obviously very normal for that to happen, but considering that they've made the final in 2 out of 3 events, you'd expect better stats from their best players basically. And I think Nota especially, like, because AW left and he was kind of the clear supportive guy, he took a lot of the kind of the rubbish in-game leading T-side roles. Nota's taken a lot of those, and his T-side rating this year is 0.95 or something like that. It is having an impact on these players as much as they're all getting praised rightfully. They are not as statistically amazing as they might be from how they're talked about, at least on an eye test, because they win every game 2-1. It's always 13-10, and they're just not quite statistically excellent. So I was interested to see what Maui would think about kind of how Yellow and Nota are talked about as kind of top prospects. Does it matter that they're low statistically, or is it just kind of a function of those close games and the really, really tough opposition? Because I think 20 of their 23 maps at Cluj are against top 10 teams.
This just reinforces the point that it is a Jame and dastan-led team, and when Jame hits his ceiling of being able to call well against the absolutely elite teams, then I don't think that the players or Jame and dastan are making this team greater than the sum of its parts, simply put. So I would guess, again, I would liken this to a similar experience I've had, where it's just that, if you put me in a ESEA main game now, where I have just my 4 boomer teammates and we can do basic stuff, like, I can call circles around most of those teams nowadays because I could just understand exactly how they're playing. But if you put me in an ECL format, or obviously like a tier 1, I would have no idea what's going on. Like, everything's so much more masked. Everything, like, people are walking way more. The rotations aren't always as clear. Sometimes they decide to be more proactive than you expect that level as a team, and then they have little set piece plays to get active. And it's kind of like why, like, basically, like, zweih's numbers on Dust 2, for example, are good against everybody practically this year except for Vitality. And I feel like that's just, I mean, it's not just, it's just that when you play those kinds of teams, you just can't get away with the same sort of little individual plays because you're getting challenged by good teamwork so frequently, and also, of course, they're hitting their shots more. But I think that the reason that some of the players even had good stats to begin with is kind of the macro is what's actually helping them much more than their own individual micro. I'm like not trying to even on any of these players say that they're going to be top 20 at the end of the year. I mean, when I did my top 30 predictions list, I didn't put any. I think zweih was the highest guy I ranked in that, around the 25th point, because I don't really see him as we have already seen. If you put zweih on another tier 1 team with a style that is any less draconian than James, he just flounders. And I think that's kind of something you could probably make an assumption about with almost any of these guys. I think the worst thing that any of these guys could do is get a little bit too hot-headed. BELCHONOKK thinks that, oh, I'm such a sick support. Spirit need a support. Let me go over to them. I think he'll be worse. I think Noda would be completely misused on that kind of team as well. As Yellow, like, it doesn't matter. I mean, to be a little rude to these guys, it's almost like if you had 5 guys of Nota's skill across Opper, IGL, and himself, like a team that was completely fitting of his abilities alone, that team is probably ranked 25th in the world. I don't think, but Jame is what helps make this into a better constellation of players as opposed to just these I don't even say diamonds in the rough. They're just unhoned
Kids from the
talent.
streets.
Yeah, they're just kids from the streets. They're literally kids from the streets. The face it
Yeah,
streets.
it's because obviously we did the EVPs for Cluj, and it's literally like Zweigh's like 105, and then the whole team are like 0.95 to 105, and it's they have to get the credit for the run, but you are kind of having to treat them a bit differently in terms of where is this credit going, and ultimately Striker now we're just like, well, it just has to go to leadership at some point, and it's fine that if we give kind of only one EVP to Zweih and he's like right at the bottom of the list because they're just statistically they're not there, and even when we did the prospects in the automated way that you love, Maui, but Nota was a lot lower than people wanted him to be, and it's because he's like 0.94 versus top 10 teams in the last 6 months. Like he's not an elite fragger statistically, and yes, they're kind of having close games and they're doing really well as a team and as a unit, but this is kind of what I wanted to dig into is are the stats kind of wrong on these players, because they do seem to be winning kind of in spite of the lack of firepower. I don't think it's completely missing like this future 1.20 rated player. I don't think that's the case.
Wait, James didn't get an EVP? Oh no.
No. He's 103. 103.
Yeah.
Look how many red maps there are. This is the thing. Like when you just open them all up.
I didn't see this article. I just got home.
Yeah.
I didn't see this one. Oh, okay.
But yeah, so Jame at this event, 48% maps above 1. Like it's just it's just never gonna happen, unfortunately. But that's the whole thing. Like when you're watching the series, it feels like they're all doing much better than they end up. And I don't know if it's just because in your head you just ignore that they're losing
the eye test of
10
having
rounds every win.
That 3K it does too long though. The eye test of that single round.
Yeah. James is another one who also feels like he's doing much better than he is, because if you're just like watching the game casually at all and you're just like flicking to the KD rather than actually thinking about what they're all doing, you just think he's doing way better because he's just permanently positive, whatever he does.
So always has a gun in his hand too, so
I'll just say he just needed to play Dust 2 way more. If all of his maps were Dust 2, this dude is getting an EVP. But you're right, on a lot of the other maps in the pool, he's just I just don't feel his impact nearly as much on like of a map that's probably supposed to suit an Opera and help them. On Mirage, I don't think I remember a single Jame moment. You know what I mean? It's like he's kind of
1v3 versus Falcons.
Okay, you know what? Okay, there's a moment, a single moment, but it's
23 maps. You'd hope he'd win at least one clutch. But I mean, he is saving less than he used to. Like he's 12.5% is like pretty standard for an Opera. It's less than Torsi this event. It's less than Molodoy. So I mean, maybe they're just being hunted a lot this tournament. I don't know what it is for the year, but there is kind of a bit of an evolution in his game as well. I think like he's still very much a passive AWPer, but I think it actually suits him in CS2 that a lot of AWPers are kind of rubbish. So it's natural to want a kind of supportive AWPer who is alive late round and can close clutches, because a lot of these kind of more aggressive AWPers aren't having much success. And unless you're an elite AWPer, like it kind of brings the AWP in-game leader back into the meta, at least for me, because it doesn't matter as much that he's, you know, a 108 rated AWPer, when a lot of star AWPers, well not stars, but a lot of primary AWPers are also posting those kinds of numbers. I think it's really important for them.
When it comes to the stat distribution, you're also just talking about, you know, Jame performing on Dust 2, but not other maps. Do you think that's also a factor for the other players where they have, you know, some players performing on maps and others not performing on other maps, and that kind of leads to that divide as well?
The roles for the PARIVISION players across maps is so related to how, I mean, they're like, I'll just give an example here. Zweih on Dust 2 just gets to from what I get to see on his B lurks especially, and I have looked back at his stuff a little closer actually on that map, which is why I refer to it. He gets to kind of control that whole side of the map. He gets to just does he want to hold for the tunnels push? Does he want to hold for the mid rotation from lower tunnels? Does he even want to leave lower tunnels to sometimes be a little bit more in mid to cut the rotation off and be a little closer to the action? I don't think that Jame and dastan are necessarily holding his hand through all of those. Like they're saying get out of tunnels. You shouldn't be in tunnels probably if he's there, but I think that's probably intuitive to him at this point. Whereas on overpass, he's the first in entry on some of their executes. It's just a completely different role for him, and that's why his overpass numbers are probably the worst of any map, if I had to guess. Yeah, they are. They are the worst of any map for him on this team. And it's supposed to be a pretty good spot because on normal default rounds, he gets to be that B lurker, but it's honestly kind of rare that PARIVISION just runs a very set standard 3-1-1 default with slow A control where their B lurker gets to prod and peek and just kind of see if there's a free 1v1 on that site. He just kind of holds back. I think he's always trying to hold the space to enact what is usually the second phase of the plan on overpass for PARIVISION, which is just exec B. So if he loses that space too early because he takes a stupid 1v1, they'd probably yell at him even more. So Dust 2 on the other hand, let him loose. He's gonna just he'll just challenge people, and that's honestly, yeah. I mean, yeah, it is totally map dependent for a lot of these guys, especially younger players. I think older players probably, I don't know if it's ego, like I don't know if Rops is saying you're gonna let me lurk for 45 seconds every round Apex. Don't tell me what to do. I don't know if it's, I doubt it's like, there's a handshake, of course, in the middle there, but Apex knows the tool that he has at his disposal, whereas on its other maps, Jame will let zweih do that on Dust 2, but I think he rules more with an iron fist on Overpass, for example.
Yeah, I was just bringing kind of the map by map stats up, and yeah, Jello's a massive Mirage merchant, which is a surprise to absolutely no one. He's like 0.12 above his positions average on Mirage, and those are the star rolls on Mirage, obviously. And then everywhere else, he's just a little bit worse. And I think that is part of it with these young players, and just kind of the comfort blanket of playing so much Dust 2 and Mirage that it is kind of useful. Although their Mirage, was it like 5 losses in a row in Cluj, I think, at the end of Mirage, and I think that's a bit of a concern for them because it was so good for them in 2025 at least. Yeah, so they lost 5 times in Cluj on Mirage, and that's part of why they had to win every series 2-1. They just lost Mirage to 5 different teams. So we can see as they're kind of being treated as a top 5 team by all these other teams in their prep that they are going to kind of have to keep evolving, and there's not a lot of time to evolve, especially when half your team are teenagers.
That's kind of what I was trying to highlight anyway, though, because like if that's what I was going through before, because BELCHONOKK, for example, is really good on Ancient, but then he has maps where he drops off in stats, and I think that's a big reason why you see such a wide distribution in terms of their overall stats. They are kind of fragging by committee depending on the map as it goes, and that is what leads to some of these kind of situations where you think they're playing better than they are, or they have better stats than they have in the end, because it is entirely series dependent, entirely map dependent in that sense. What I also want to pick both your brains about is we are starting to see teams countering them, and this is always what happens. You have a team that rises up and they start getting anti-stratted, they start getting red. How much of an impact do you see that having to this PARIVISION? Because obviously Jame has the experience, dastan has the experience, the other players not so much, and as they stay in this top 5, top 8 area of the top teams, and they're playing at all these events, that's just going to happen more and more. And so do you see them dropping off in terms of that, and how far do you think that they're going to be able to maintain this?
To me, they'll definitely drop off. They are, I'm sure that if people dive into the demos a little bit more, they could probably find nade tendencies that set up specific plays, which then in turn can lead to making harder reads against what it is that they're trying to accomplish on their T sides. Beyond that, I just don't find a team that has no true star player ever being consistently competitive. That's why on the flip side, Vitality still maintains the era that they have, because on one hand, you have world-class tactics constantly evolving, great game plans in terms of anti-stratting opponents, always slightly having an identity for how you want to play, but slightly shifting it to better fit and defeat your opponents. But on top of that, even if the game plan is not perfect, star players can bail you out, and they practically have a star in it, or at least not a star in terms of resources and how they're shifting their play, but just a guy that's going to overperform per position in every single role that they have, barring Apex. So PARIVISION, on the other hand, are living and dying by Jame's live macro reads, and that's just that'll eventually fall off. There were teams in the the Eastern European RMRs, for example, in like the Gambit versus VP sort of days, where they had specific protocols that it was actually kind of cool watching at that time, because there were certain ways that these teams play mid rounds out that were to counter each other. So, for example, the one that I'll always refer to that Yakindar got mad at because I said it on its server time one time, actually, where he's like, don't give away our strats, was every 5v3 that VP had, especially when they played against teams like Gambit, was that they would just, on T sides, they would send one extremity player out A with no nades practically, and they'd send one towards B with no nades. And then the rest of the three would sort of be in like a good middle of the map position that can then go to whichever position had the non-stack bomb site, because they knew that in the Russian CIS scene at that time, everybody in 3v5s on their CT side is just stacking. They're all stacking. Everybody, like, stacking was so common, whereas it's kind of a remnant of like just European. I'd say like Fnatic, for example. Like they would just play 1-1-1, and they would just hope that JW, Flusha, or Olafmeister gets a triple kill. You know, they would just pray because they had the better players. And NIP did that too. You know, they wouldn't even change their setup in a man deficit situation, because they just thought, well, someone's gonna be a hero this round. But I think as teams play PARIVISION more, they're not gonna run into stacks. Like the amount of times PARIVISION gets away with playing 3B on Dust 2,
Yep.
and then people go into it, is absurd. It's actually just, it's unfounded. It's almost embarrassing for those teams to keep doing it over and over, because they could just scout a little bit more. And I'm not saying it's easy to always scout on Dust 2. Like you can play if you play 3B, it's hard to find that third guy, because he's usually just tucked in backside or a car, and he's just gonna spring up when the other guys are already, when the T's are broaching they're taking the bomb site, they're breaching it. But I just think that prodding A could probably be a little bit better. And I think teams will start doing that, which will probably hurt PARIVISION's CT side win rate in the long run. You know, if they throw a single flash off Cat and they're thinking to themselves, okay, nobody has shot us, we know we forced an opera off the angle, they probably have 3B right now. Let's just continue with this A play. I think people are going to start changing their mid rounds up, and it'll definitely catch up to PARIVISION. It won't be like a widespread stylistic choice, but I think when teams like, for example, G2 plays PARIVISION the next time, I would bet I would put money on the fact that G2 wins that or plays them extremely close, because I think they'll just have studied their tendencies enough between this tournament and last.
It's going to hurt Zweigh's CT ratings a lot as well. If people start running into stacks, because he's always the third guy on this team, just sat there with his MP7, top of Balk or whatever it is. And I think that is the key thing when you talk about, is this sustainable, is just the firepower is just not, like, in an era like this, like you can even see with a team like Maus that has probably more firepower, like definitely more firepower, but
Yeah.
even they kind of struggle when it gets to absolute crunch time, when it's not just kind of winning off the game plan that Cyclone's prepared for them. Like that's when it gets tough, and that's when the high firepower teams often just beat them. And I think with PARIVISION, it'll end up being a similar thing, where they're always going to have a high floor because James Macro is so good, and he's able to kind of pivot mid-round in a way a lot of in-game leaders who are just kind of babied by their coach can't at the moment, and that is a bit of a differential for them. But at some point, the individuals does matter. And I can't remember the last time a team with such a low round win percentage was actually elite. Like maybe it's like Na'Vi Copenhagen's always the famous one, whereas like they didn't even win 50% of rounds and then they won the major. But there's a reason it wasn't sustainable until the summer for Na'Vi, when they actually had so much better, like kind of the system had kind of evolved to a point where it was actually able to kind of counter the firepower. And it's The question for PARIVISION is whether they can do that, and I don't think so, because the players are too raw to kind of evolve the system past just reliance on James macro reads and kind of being a bit underprepared for it at times.
I think the big thing with that is also teams getting the experience playing against them, because it is very different watching a demo versus actually being in the server. And once you have a feel for it in the server, it is actually like you do get a chance to get those kind of reads. And that's what all the other in-game leaders have talked about, what a lot of players have talked about in interviews, as I said earlier, is you need that experience of actually playing Jame to start, getting that feel for it again. And it's been a long time since he was consistently at the top like this. So I think you're right that we will start seeing that drop off as they go and as teams are actually able to play against them more. Here, you had this picture of dastan. I'm not sure if you had more to say, or if you want to move straight on to the.
It's just in case he came up, but I
B-Trams.
think we covered him with the meme slide in the end, so we're all good.
Yeah. Okay. In that case, well, you have. I don't know why this. Okay, there we go. You have this stats from B-Trams that you've popped up. He did make this new couple of new stats that he has. He has Eek as well, but this one's basically about the round start weapon percent. One's from the
by
major.
the way, I
release, so-
asked him to do this one. I messaged him privately and said, you gotta make this, because these conversations about Donk being dropped way more than any other star are so crazy. When I am watching games where Zaiwu just also is dropped an op, dropped an AK, like it happens not as much as we know from the numbers, but I think if you even factor in economy of the op costing twice as much as an AK, in fact, you might even, it's an easy case to make that ZywOo is given the most resources of any star player. That's a very easy. Maybe it doesn't give the bodies, like, the people, or the people jumping up in front of Donk or whatever, like, whatever spirit haters or Donk haters say that he's given. That's a different aspect. But in terms of pure economy in the hands of the player, easy case that ZywOo gets the most.
It's funny because when he put out that first post that had the Donk and ZywOo comparisons for their economy, I even said that, okay, this clearly shows that they do have pretty similar balance. And people are like, oh no, Donk's bar is bigger. I'm like, okay, but ZywOo's bar is like an op for a big chunk of it. It makes a huge difference.
Exactly. And yeah, that was a weird. I don't know why that narrative went on for a while. I didn't hear Sponge say this, but somebody said that Sponge said that ZywOo, look at ZywOo's not getting the guns as much as Donk, and I was like, we're definitely watching different games here. We're definitely
both should be getting the guns as well, by the way.
Yeah, and also I want Donk, I want ZywOo, I want Xantares, I even want Jame. I want anybody that can be a difference maker with a hero weapon to have a gun in their hands when it's affordable.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big thing with Molodoi as well, right? And it hurts his rank 3.0 quite a lot, because he's playing every round with an AWP, so his kills count for a little bit less. But it's kind of what you want from your star player is to want that extra gun. And I think for PARIVISION, it's a bit different in that James not really the star, but they still always like to have him on an AWP because it surprises people to kind of have that kind of round two. And maybe it shouldn't. Maybe this is one of those things they've just forgotten what playing VP was like. But you should always expect the other team to have an AWP, even if it's round 2 or something, and someone got a free K in the pistol. But the other reason I wanted to bring
James starts his more than half of his rounds with an AWP is absolutely insane. By the way,
I think this one's just one. This one's just one event. So this is Star Ladder, because I wanted to show that the
it gets
difference.
Worse.
Yeah,
it's 53 here.
Winning more rounds. But I think it's interesting because obviously when you go to AW before, there was that big difference of, okay, so this guy's literally, James got an AWP for the same amount of time as this guy's got a primary gun. Like that was the thing that spoke to me here. And then if you go to the next one, then zweih is bottom, but obviously we've been talking about him as if he's got way more resources on the team than you would think for someone at the bottom of a chart like this. And I think that's just kind of illustrative of the spread and the equal hierarchy between pretty much all 4 riflers. Like BELCHONOKK maybe gets to be a little bit more passive, but not a lot. Like if there's ever a 1vx, they want Jame to be in it. Like all the riflers' job is to, take space basically. So I think it's interesting because I think it's another one where they've got really clearly defined roles in a positional sense. Like it's very obvious that we've got 2 space takers, 2 lurkers, and zweih's kind of able to be a bit more aggressive. But then when you look at it like this, you can kind of see they're still they're still working out where the resources should go. And obviously, Jame's the easy answer a lot of the time. But in terms of like 1-star rifler, they haven't really completely worked out where to put which basket to put their eggs in.
Any thoughts on this distribution, Alex?
I mean,
'Cause,
I
mean, also what's crazy here is if you compare this to a lot of other teams, the amount of rifles they have per round is insane, just because of how much they save.
yeah, that's true. The Jame one is just the clear, hilarious outlier for me. The even spread between the rest of the players, I would say is, I mean, generally, I probably would want Nota to have a rifle more than everybody else, just because he's generally space taking a little bit more. I'd want an AK in his hands to take those initial fights, whereas Zweih on the extremities, especially playing to punish somebody that's pushing his bomb, pushing his side of the map. You don't really. It's more about those kind of fights to me are more about positioning than a good weapon.
Yeah.
I would probably, if I'm PARIVISION and I want my space taker to have the AK, and I want my guy that's playing to punish on the extremities, because I'm not looking for Zweih to be a win condition if I'm PARIVISION. I don't, other than like I was mentioning, what was it, Dust2 versus Stralis, or really when he's just let off the leash a little bit more versus certain teams. I want him to have the Galil, or I want him to have the MAC-10, or whatever his SMG of choice is on that side, just because, or even a Tech-9 sometimes, where it'll usually, based off of positioning, get the kill that he's supposed to get, but I'm not looking for him like AKI is a gun I see more as like a breaching weapon. You need that one-shot headshot to just get that pesky CT out of there. Sometimes even the Galil doesn't feel good enough, just because you're not trying to find a dink and push him back. You're trying to actually just secure the kill, put yourself in a 5v4. You can work from there. So yeah, give Zweih the worst weapon. That's fine with me.
Yeah.
It's
The other
also
thing
like
is
if you're
that
playing Halls on Inferno and SMG's fine over, taking
Totally,
down a fight.
totally.
like
Sometimes
that.
you want
Yeah,
it
or
for just being a
anchoring.
freak.
Yeah,
if
but
you want
the
to
funny
freak
thing
through
is
the
that
halls.
yeah, because Zweih is obviously mechanically really good, and that's why you got a lot of praise for in Amiga and everything. But there's a case to be made on this team. He's probably got the 4th best aim of the riflers. Like some of the shots BELCHONOKK was hitting in that final. Like his KD was never that good, but every time he got a kill, I think the Falcons game as well, the Dust2, he was hitting some crazy headshots, and he's probably, in terms of actual getting the AK, you'd probably still put him 3rd. So I think that says even more about the way the team's set up. And you're right that Nota definitely gets the AK more because he is more likely to be the one to find those entries.
We can move on to our favorite end of show segment with all the forum threads. There's quite a few, so we don't have to dwell on all of them. But we have one that says PARIVISION Lucky by Lil Peep Big City Blues with the Brazilian flag. That says faces Shiro and Donk on an off day. Faces Kesurata and Maladoy on an off day. Now Nico and Monesi playing like Ultimate and Kerrigan. Too lucky. And this one says Nico and Monesi always play like Ultimate and Kerrigan when it matters most. Do you think PARIVISION were just lucky? This is back for the Blast Bounty run, obviously.
Well, clearly not, because they just made it to another grand final of of one of the toughest formats to fluke your way through. I mean, you just can't fluke your way through a Swiss format with all BO3s and then get to the grand final against other teams that did that. Yeah, people can decide whether they think that somebody had an easier bracket side than another, but it's if all of those teams were able to qualify to that playoff, there's definitely a reason. And that's even something I would say more about Cluj than I would about majors, because you can kind of, I mean, I'm not going to say that Paris was a fluke for 4 of the teams in the playoffs there, but BO1s probably had something to do with how wacky that ended up. So no, I don't think PARIVISION are they're clearly not flukes, but they could get more discovered over time.
It's also not a coincidence when star players consistently have off days against your team. Like, that is a Jame classic, really.
Harry, are you going to take this Monesi slander?
Look, apparently I'm a zweih super fan these days, so I think you're a bit behind on this one. It's a long time ago, those Monesi memes. I've completely... The forums have moved
never
on.
Die, though.
You should
know they'll never die.
Oh, no, obviously.
We have a thread that just says PARIVISION by Prison Shifter with a Russian flag that says PV is VP backwards. VP were a top 10 team, now they're top 100. PV were a top 100 team, now they're top 10. Coincidence?
I mean, it's
So-
good, but I guess the question is, do you think Jame would be as good now if he was never cut from VP?
No.
I don't think so. I feel like his style has evolved since then. I think the players also that VP started gearing towards just they wouldn't buy into the system the way that these young players have either.
Yeah, just because I've seen a few people be like, "Oh, VP was clearly so stupid for getting rid of him." It's like, well, like that lineup was very dire, and maybe electronic was not the fix, but had to do something.
It's electronic poisoned that team for one. So there is actually a world where Jame may have been right all along with the way that he wanted to play, but I find that I would assume his benching from VP made him reassess some of his values and modernize how PARIVISION want to play versus a VP team that did feel to be a bit more of a relic. I mean, I also, I mean, I think in some ways, the NVIDIA crash was the best thing that could have happened to Jame. You know, the butterfly effect of the NVIDIA crash is actually, that should be a 5 video. The 5 video should really be that they replace Mir with Electronic. Electronic then starts to doubt Jame. Jame gets benched from VP, reassesses his entire career, builds himself from the ground up to then culminating in lifting a trophy at a tier 1 event to kick off 2026 and make a grand final as well. I think that's a pretty good study of how one singular hardware failure actually really did more than it might have even done good by the end of it. I think it did good. I think the NVIDIA crash was a good thing.
PGL shield now, of course. PGL employee. Blast employee.
I didn't even work that event.
PGL employee. No.
I didn't even work that. They didn't even hire me for that one. So I think it's the only major I've missed since I started doing majors, I think. So yeah.
Do you guys think CS2 has played a big part in the evolution of Jame as well, with the ability to break smokes and just the way that can change a little bit of the timings and not sit behind spots for, a minute like he used to?
Yeah. I still feel like playing to punish and holding is a smidgen weaker than it was in CSGO, where you could, if you really wanted to on T side, you could just kind of have 5 guys sitting in B halls in Mirage. You could have B halls Mirage, you could have a guy in Palace, you could have a guy ramp, you could have a guy top mid, you could have a guy underpass, and if the CTs challenge those guys badly, without really perfect set pieces, all of them would just win their fights. It almost felt like all of those were lightly favorable, which allowed Jame to call that slow constricting style where it's almost, if you want to make an aggressive play because you feel like you're getting choked out, you're just going to die. Whereas now in CS2 and his personnel, if they just sit back on their heels and they do a good 2-man flash play to reclaim any of those spaces I just mentioned, that it's actually the lurker is going to die, not the 2-man. So I think I don't know, the smoke breaks, I'm not really actually completely convinced that I'm not sure actually. Not sure about
I
how
don't
PARIVISION
think
work with that.
so what's interesting is I don't think it's necessarily that they break smokes to run through them as much as other teams, but I would say that they use other teams breaking smokes to help their misinformation, in a sense. Like, they might take some space, they'll let the teams break smokes for info, and then they'll go back once teams have gambled towards the other side or have started rotating. And you could even see that in some of the Vitality and like some of the rounds on that Inferno game where Vitality were re-clearing spots, they fell off, and then PARIVISION came back. So I think there is an element of how that's helped him with his misdirection, because that's always something that he's decent with. But if we move on, we have a thread by DMX Craw with the Russian flag that says, "Poor Jame. Mouse were so bad, Jame couldn't even use his tactic, play 3 maps with million overtimes."
It's the only 2-0, wasn't it?
And that was their only 2-0.
the whole time.
So this is more of a conversation topic. We have Took Y with the Russian flag again that says, "If Jame is Jesus, who are his 12 apostles?"
First of all, why does this guy heart Aragorn? Does he hate Simple? I think hearting
Lord of the
Aragorn.
Rings, surely.
Yeah,
It's not the
hearting. Exactly. If you like Aragorn at this point, and for people that are audio only listeners, it's just this guy's favorite player, according to what he displays on his forum tag, is Heart Aragorn. So yeah, I mean, that dude is horrible. That dude needs to leave. Actually, BC Game need to actually bench him today. Okay, I don't even care. All right. Yeah, we could get back to it, the actual topic though.
Who are
It's
his
your
12
Kinder plus
apostles?
11. It's like,
Yeah.
if you were doing a Jame coaching tree, it's not gone that well for basically anyone. We'll see how Mir does his IGL of new VP. Maybe he'll have 2 apostles.
It's got to be just the 4 guys that he has with him at PARIVISION now. You got to put Sanji in there. I mean, Sanji gave up absolutely everything just to even, sniff the floor that Jame walked on.
It's a reason.
It's completely unreasonable. Kicker too. Kicker
Yeah.
now thinks he's living in the what Yakindar did as I don't even know. Kicker's career trajectory has just been tragic, actually. Like he's on PARIVISION before Jame gets there.
Yep.
What was the IGL at first? Then Jame takes it back over, and Kicker is just outdated and just. I mean, he's phased out completely. Like there's no room for him anymore on the roster.
Goes to MIBR after that. Still a
Yeah.
very strange move.
It made
so
sense.
we have
It
like
made
5
sense.
to
I'm sure
6
it helped Klim
apostles.
be as good as he is, but
Probably Fame and Flit.
Yeah.
Probably has to be Fame and Flit are in the mix.
Norbert.
So we have Fame,
It's
Flit,
just all his
Nikinder,
teammates.
Sanji,
Yeah, maybe.
and then his current teammates.
I
We're
don't,
at
know
8.
if, I don't know if Dastan's an apostle though, just because Dastan might have actually guided Jame in some aspects. I'm not sure. I'm actually just
Yeah,
not sure.
I don't think
Yeah.
you could put Dastan.
If-
So
if
he's a
James
work in progress. He has
chooses-
4 more to come.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of career left, I guess.
Yep. Now, Harry, you found this thread. I actually had this up, and then you sent it to me just before, and it's by GL_1major_Nico0_major with a Lithuanian flag that says BELCHONOKK aim. A little bit late since Cluj ended a week ago, but is it just me, or does BELCHONOKK's aim remind anyone else of Scream? His taps are micro adjustments, are fucking mental when he's on. Sometimes he disappears when he isn't on, but when he is, the guy is a fucking headshot machine. Really fun player to watch in PARIVISION, which is full of fun players to watch.
Yeah, they are fun. I think that's the main thing. It's not the stats page that makes them kind of interesting as prospects. It is very much when you're watching them and kind of just see the mechanical ability within the system work. And BELCHONOKK is the exact example of that. Like it doesn't matter what KD finishes a map on. You'll see him at some point just actually hit some unbelievable headshots.
Would you say his aim is like Scream? Oh.
Maybe Shroud.
It's not that aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
Scream was a feeling. It was you just couldn't take your eyes off of it. With BELCHONOKK, not quite. No, not quite.
It makes me think that this person didn't actually watch Scream.
No, yeah,
Watched a few TikTok highlights.
yeah, perhaps.
So this one I pulled up because it mentioned Maui. It's a long one. I'll get through the quick bits. It's by Sex Tax. I don't actually know what flag that is. And it says PARIVISION being discredited. It says everyone is like PARIVISION didn't, but Falcons just lost. All of you are flaming Monacy for the overpeak, but no one's appreciating Noda for how smartly he handled the clutch. No one is appreciating BELCHONOKK, and he says a lot about how the other players performed. And then, mind you, these are 18 to 22-year-olds who handle these situations like an experienced pro, the undying spirit, the fact you can never count out of the match regardless of scoreline. Maui in Blast Bounty said he doesn't think PARIVISION would have defeated Falcons with Kiyosuke, but as always, he was proven dead wrong. PARIVISION is the team who has not been 2-0'd by any big team in 2026. Against Mouse, they won dust. Against Fury, every map was close. The win yesterday was close as well, but if it weren't for crowd cheating in the pistol rounds, then it could have been a bigger margin, especially on Ancient, after when the crowd gave away his position in Red Room, the only time Falcons was dominating the first half of Mirage. So Maui, how do you respond to these allegations that you're always proven dead wrong?
Well, I mean, I was in an aspect there. I mean, I did think with how I didn't even think that was a very hot take that with Kyosuke they win versus PARIVISION
studio.
today when legitimately the scoreline on 2 of the maps was 13-11 or 13-10. I mean, there were 3 it was a 3-0 for PARIVISION, but 2 of the maps were extremely close score lines.
And they just abused Nucleons
And,
on B.
and Nucleons was by far the worst player in that series. And also, if people want to look back and think that, you know, think what they will about, oh, Nucleons can shoot. His stats were Stewie's on G2 on G Stew. Okay, his stats were practically the exact same as G Stewie's stats, and G Stewie was obviously running in first to die to make space for people and set them up, and he wasn't even playing remotely selfishly. Okay, beside that fact, I'm almost surprised that it was almost actually subtraction by addition that once they got Kyosuke back for Falcons, they played worse. I don't know how that even is remotely possible, but how about this? The next time, I'll even stand on it. The next time PARIVISION plays Falcons, Falcons will win. Okay? I'm not even one of the people that's doubling down or tripling down about Falcons have to get it together. I've actually given up hope with this lineup to win a trophy, really. I think it's so unlikely. But they will beat PARIVISION the next time. So I'll be proven dead wrong again if they mess up a third time.
What about the over or under on Kyosuke's death count for 54 in this best of 3? It's just classic Kyosuke in an arena at this point. It's just
yeah. The lights are a bit annoying now for this guy. Yeah. He'll get there one day.
So this is a two-parter because there are comments from the same thread, and it says it's by God Donk King with the Singapore flag. It says Jame Ramadan buff. Let's see if he even makes final and wins. And someone asks, is he Muslim? And he gets a reply.
Aragorn again.
No.
Yeah,
It is.
Aragorn lover.
It's our guy Tuki, who's banned now, of course.
He's banned on the forums. Okay.
And then you have the comments that says, look, his name, Jame Ali. He says, who cares? He was born in Novorossiysk. He is not circumcised. His Afghani father, we don't know was he Muslim or not, left him in childhood. His mother is 100% Russian. He is from Christian city. Stop with this Jame plus Islam. This is never a thing. And then we have a reply from Double Lamb Chili Sauce. Says, you don't know if he is Muslim or not, but you know that he is not circumcised? ? And then we have another comment from M50B20 that says he is not circumcised. How can one obtain such information? And poet the HLTV lives up to his name and says, lots of dick sucking.
It just kept the newsreader voice for that whole thing.
Of course.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
I mean, the Ramadan buff, I'm a Liverpool fan. I've had to watch Mo Salah during Ramadan. It can't be good for you. It can't be good for sport. It just can't.
I'm gonna stay away from that one. I don't want to make bad assumptions. Yeah,
there's really not much to say other than to read the doubt. You know, some of these threads you just have to read and laugh either at them or what they say.
It doesn't seem, and again, assumption. This is the most I'll say about it. It doesn't seem like he's really practicing, but I'm not as a Muslim. But you know, I mean, you could be born into a religion via your family and not really adhere to every part of it.
Obviously that closes out the forum thread section. So as we reach the end of the show, Alex, anything you wanted to leave us with? Any closing thoughts about PARIVISION or anything else you wanted to say?
I'll continue to stand on business. I went on Ted's podcast shortly after they won the bounty, and I immediately said they will not be lifting another trophy this season. And I will stand by that I enjoy watching PARIVISION. I like how they have changed the scene. In fact, I find them extremely enjoyable. I think that it's actually one of the reasons that perhaps it's a bit boring to watch a Mau's team as they go on these deep runs and not win trophies is actually that their style isn't very compelling. It almost just seems like the poor man's vitality in a lot of ways. They're almost like an abridged vitality where they don't actually let their players run out defaults all the way. But I just like that Jame, when he has a hunching around, you see them follow his command. And that was my favorite aspect of VP. I know that back in the day when he was on Outsiders and everything, a lot of the 2022-21 casts, people were really down on watching VP overpass. I thought it was fine. I actually found it pretty enjoyable. From a macro sense, it was one of my favorite teams. Do I wish at moments that I could 1.5x the round? Yeah, okay, but I understood the thought process behind everything that he was doing. It was almost just that you can't always see the influence of an IGL on every single round, but with Jame, you can. And that to me is one of the best aspects of Counter-Strike and one of my favorite aspects of watching PARIVISION. So I'm going to continue enjoying them, but I don't think they're going to win anything.